Why did the wind sound like it was whispering warnings tonight? It cut across the ridge like a blade, carrying the cold scent of dust, oil, and something else, the metallic trace of danger. Lieutenant Vera Kensington adjusted her position behind a jagged outcrop, her cheek brushing the coarse stone as she pressed her binoculars to her eyes. Below, the valley stretched in silence, 1,000 meters of dust and shadows hiding a mission that looked simple only on paper. From up here, it was never simple. 3,000 meters down, a SEAL team was moving 6 figures, deliberate and efficient, ghosts cutting through the canyon with the precision of muscle memory. They were here to extract a high-value target. In and out. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Except Vera had learned that simple, in this part of the world, was just another word for not yet complicated. Corporal Finch Daringer shifted beside her, the radio pressed too tightly to his chest, as if holding it close could make it less likely to betray his nerves. He was young, still had that sharpness in his eyes that only people untouched by real chaos carried. The kind of soldier who still believed things happened for reasons. "You doing okay there, Corporal?" Vera's voice was calm, low, the kind of tone you used when trying not to wake ghosts. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Just seems quiet, too quiet, you know." Vera allowed herself a thin smile, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. That's exactly what we want it to be. Quiet means they don't know we're here. She didn't add that quiet never lasted. Down below, the SEAL team reached the compound, a cluster of stone walls and shadows in the center of the valley. She watched as Commander Holly's Brenamman led them to the door. He was all precision, the kind of man who didn't waste movement, didn't waste breath, and didn't waste time acknowledging people he thought weren't essential. She remembered his glance during the mission briefing, the one that had measured her and dismissed her in the same second. "Support personnel, overwatch, stay out of the way." He hadn't meant it cruelly. It was just how some officers saw the world, in layers of importance. And support wasn't one of them. Vera didn't take it personally anymore. You stopped doing that after the first few times it happened. You learned that silence was easier than justification, that it was better to let people underestimate you. The team stacked at the entrance. "Room clear," came the radio call, moving to second floor. So far, everything was smooth, the kind of silence that lulled people into forgetting how fragile luck really was. Finch finally exhaled, shoulders dropping. "See, easy, they'll be out in 15 minutes. But Vera didn't answer. Her attention had shifted to the far ridge 2 kilometers east, a flicker of movement, maybe a glint, or maybe the shadows had twitched wrong. She steadied her binoculars, adjusted focus. And there it was. Movement, 3, no, 4 figures, spaced like they'd been trained, carrying weapons, advancing uphill to an angle that overlooked the entire valley. Her stomach tightened, not with fear but with recognition. That ridge wasn't random. It was a perfect overwatch position, the kind of place she'd pick. "Finch," she said softly, "get on the radio. Tell Commander Brenamman, multiple hostiles on the East Ridge, moving into overwatch position. 4 confirmed." Finch's hands trembled slightly as he keyed the mic. "Command, this is observation post Delta. 4 hostiles moving into overwatch. East Ridge, 2 clicks from your position, setting up for possible ambush." The response came sharp. "Confirm visual, how many hostiles?" "4, sir," Finch said, glancing at her for confirmation. She didn't nod, she didn't need to. He could see the certainty in her eyes. Vera studied the enemy team through the scope. They weren't amateurs. They moved with purpose, covering sectors, setting up a crew-served weapon on a tripod. The glint she'd seen earlier was the barrel of a machine gun. "Negative on engagement," came Brenamman's voice through static. "We're moving to exfil in 30 seconds. Can you confirm if they've acquired our position?" Vera's lips pressed into a line. The gunner was settling in. Another few seconds, he'd have the SEAL team perfectly in his sights. Negative, she said quietly, but they will in less than 30 seconds. They're setting up a heavy gun. Once they open fire, your team will be pinned down. Finch relayed the message, his voice cracking halfway through. The radio came alive, clipped commands, boots moving, the controlled chaos of soldiers realizing they just stepped into a kill zone. Air support ETA 20 minutes, someone said. 20 minutes too late. Vera's mind shifted into the rhythm that only came from long years and harder choices. Distance, 2,000 meters. Wind, 12 miles per hour cross from west. Temperature difference, 8 degrees. Drop, drift, flight time. The math of survival. Her issued M4 lay across her lap, useless for what needed to happen next. She looked down at the duffel under her sleeping bag, the one she wasn't supposed to have. Inside, wrapped in a weatherproof case that didn't officially exist, was something that could. An M110 semi-automatic sniper rifle, customized, tuned to her heartbeat. "Lieutenant, that's not authorized," Finch stammered, eyes wide as she pulled the weapon free. "Neither is dying," she said quietly. He froze, watching as she unfolded the bipod, checked chamber, adjusted scope. Every movement was smooth, deliberate, the kind of fluency that came only from repetition so deep it replaced thought. "Commander didn't authorize engagement," Finch tried again. Vera settled the rifle into her shoulder. "He won't have to." The scope framed the valley, the world shrinking to crosshairs and breathing. The SEAL team was still moving, unaware that death was being assembled above them. The gunner's finger brushed the trigger. Vera exhaled and squeezed. The crack tore through the valley like thunder. The gunner's head snapped back, body folding before sound could reach him. The machine gun fell silent before it ever spoke. The other fighters froze, confusion rippling through them. Finch stared. You just." 2,000 meters, Vera murmured, "give or take." She chambered another round, fired again. Another man dropped. The remaining two scattered into the rocks, disappearing from view. Below, the SEALs sprinted for cover, alive. Because of her. The radio erupted. "Observation Post Delta report. Who fired those shots? Identify immediately." Vera didn't hesitate. She lifted the mic. "Observation Post Delta. 2 hostiles down, remaining retreating. Extraction route clear." Static then. "I did not authorize engagement," Brenamman's voice snapped. "Who fired?" "Lieutenant Vera Kensington, support personnel," she said evenly. "Confirmed kills at approximately 2,000 meters." Silence, long enough for her to picture the expression forming on his face. A man who just had his entire understanding of the situation rewritten by a single bullet. "Lieutenant Kensington," he said finally, cold and slow, "remain at your position. When we reach you, we're going to have a conversation about chain of command and unauthorized weapons discharge." "Understood, Commander." She set the radio down. The sun was dipping now, painting long shadows across the valley, 6 men alive because she'd broken every rule that told her to stand still. Finch sat beside her, staring at the rifle as if it were a live thing. "You just saved them," he whispered, "and he's angry." "Protocol doesn't bleed," Vera said softly. "People do." They waited, 40 minutes until the SEALs climbed the ridge, silent and heavy-footed. When Commander Brenamman appeared, his jaw was locked tight. He looked from her to the rifle case, then back to her. "Where did you get that?" "Personal property, sir." "You brought unauthorized equipment into a forward post." "I brought the tools I needed," she said, "and they worked." His nostrils flared. "You violated direct orders. You engaged without authorization. You risked." "Lives," she interrupted quietly. "Yes, I risked mine to save yours." The air between them was sharp as glass. Behind him, his men shifted, unsure whether to look away or watch. "You're correct," Brenamman said finally, voice barely above a whisper. My team would be dead if not for those shots, but don't mistake survival for approval. She nodded once. There was nothing to argue. Every word he said was true. Then Chief Lindstrom, weathered calm, stepped forward. "Commander," he said, "that first shot, 2,000 meters, crosswind, moving target. I've seen maybe 5 people in my career make that kind of shot." He looked at Vieira. "Who are you, Lieutenant?" "Just support personnel, Chief." Brenamman frowned, pulling out his tablet, scrolling through her record. And then his expression shifted, anger turning to something else. Recognition. "Kensington, Afghanistan," he muttered. "You're that Kensington." The ridge fell silent. Even Finch looked stunned. "The one who held off a Taliban assault for 6 hours, Brenamman continued quietly. "The one with the long-range kill record that's still classified. They called you Ghost." Vieira said nothing. "Why?" Brenamman asked. "Is one of the best snipers in the U.S. military sitting on a ridge with binoculars and a radio, pretending to be support." Vieira looked past him at the valley, now calm, as if nothing had happened at all. "There was an incident," she said finally. "A mission that went sideways. I made decisions that saved lives but looked bad in a report. So they buried me. Easier than explaining why they were wrong." Brenamman studied her for a long time, then nodded slowly, not in agreement, but in understanding. "Lieutenant," he said, "I don't like rule breakers, but I like dead men even less. You saved my team. That counts for something. You'll stay on Overwatch until we figure out what to do next." As the SEALs moved to secure their gear, the last light faded from the valley. Vieira sat alone again, the rifle case closed beside her. The wind whispered through the rocks, the same cold voice it always had. And she wondered, not for the first time, how many rules had been written by people who'd never been shot at. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What does it feel like to save 6 lives and still be treated like a problem? For Lieutenant Vieira Kensington, the answer came with the silence that followed the rescue, a silence thicker than gratitude. The SEALs had descended into the valley for exfil, their voices curt over the radio, professionalism layered over shock. Above them, on that desolate ridge, Vieira sat with her rifle dismantled and cleaned piece by piece until it gleamed under the dying light. The wind brushed past her face, whispering through the sandbags. Finch sat a few feet away, pretending to check the radio, though he hadn't said a word in 20 minutes. When the extraction team finally reached them, the air changed. Boots on rock, hard breathing. Commander Brenamman was first to appear, jaw locked, expression unreadable. He'd spent 40 minutes climbing that ridge and, she suspected, every one of those minutes convincing himself not to explode when he got there. "Lieutenant Kensington," he said, "we have several things to discuss." "Yes, sir." Her tone was calm, the same tone she'd used when steadying her rifle earlier that day. He didn't waste time. "You smuggled unauthorized equipment into a forward observation post. You violated direct orders. You engaged without command authorization. Do you deny any of that?" "No, sir." "Then tell me why." "Because, Commander," she said quietly, "if I hadn't, you'd be dead." The wind filled the silence that followed, a raw, uneasy kind of quiet. The other SEALs stood a few meters behind him, eyes flicking between the two. Chief Lindstrom cleared his throat. "Sir, if I may, that first shot," he shook his head slightly. "That wasn't luck. That was art. 2,000 meters in gusting crosswind. I've seen a handful of shooters in my entire career who could even attempt it." Brenamman turned toward him but didn't interrupt. Lindstrom wasn't challenging his authority. He was nomming a truth too heavy to ignore. "Who are you, Lieutenant?" he asked again, quieter now. Vieira didn't answer. She didn't need to. Brenamman was already scrolling through his tablet, through personnel files he hadn't bothered to read before. When he stopped, his expression changed, confusion, recognition, disbelief. "You're that Kensington," he said finally. Afghanistan, the ghost, the sniper who held off an entire Taliban assault so her unit could evacuate. Her eyes didn't flicker. That was a long time ago, sir. And now you're sitting here pretending to be support personnel. Not pretending, she said, just following orders. Brenamman studied her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his anger wavered. Why? What happened? There was an incident, she said simply. A mission gone wrong. I made choices that saved lives but embarrassed people with stars on their shoulders. They needed someone to blame, and I was convenient. Lindstrom nodded slowly. They buried you. Something like that. The ridge fell silent again. Only the sound of the wind, steady, indifferent, filling the space between them. Finally, Brenamman spoke. You know what the problem is, Lieutenant. You're right. My men are alive because you broke the rules. And I can't report that because if I do, they'll court-martial you and pretend none of this ever happened. But if I ignore it, I'm telling my team that orders don't matter. He exhaled, long and tired. So we'll do neither. For now, you stay on overwatch, you report, you observe, you fire only when absolutely necessary. Understood? Understood, sir. But they both knew that line, only when absolutely necessary, was just words. The battlefield rarely waited for permission. Night came fast, dragging a cold silence across the valley. The SEALs camped at the base, and Vera sat alone at her post, watching the stars burn cold above the desert. Finch had finally drifted to sleep, his radio still clutched against his chest. She envied him, his certainty that rules were meant to be followed, that every wrong could be corrected with an apology. She lived long enough to know better. When she finally closed her eyes, it wasn't rest she found. It was memory. The village in Afghanistan, the one where everything had gone wrong. A dirt road, a call she'd made that no one wanted her to make, 3 shots through walls that intelligence said were civilian, shots that saved 30 men and ended her career in the field. She'd been right, but right wasn't what the report had needed. The next day came with orders, not punishment, not yet, just precision-wrapped formality. Lieutenant Kensington, Brenamman's voice came through the radio at dawn, clipped but measured. My team is debriefing now. I'll be up shortly. When he arrived, he wasn't alone. Lindstrom carried a folded map and an encrypted tablet. We have another objective, Brenamman said, spreading the map across the sandbags. 15 kilometers north. Intelligence officer. Coordinates enemy movement in this region. High value. Smart, paranoid, mobile. We've tracked him to a compound, meeting local commanders tomorrow morning. Vera studied the terrain. Narrow valley, steep ridges, minimal cover. He chose well, she murmured. Multiple escape routes, elevated perimeters. You attack head-on, you'll lose half your team. That's why you're here, Lindstrom said. The commander wants you watching that compound 12 hours before we move. Identify every guard, every position, every weapon. And if it goes bad... I take the shot, Vera finished. Brenamman's expression hardened, but there was something else beneath it, trust, reluctant but growing. Let's just hope it doesn't come to that. She didn't tell him that hope was a poor strategy. That night Vera prepared her gear in silence. She disassembled her rifle, cleaned every part until it gleamed under red-filtered light, checked ammunition, and rechecked her optic zero. Finch hovered nearby, still looking half in awe and half in fear. You're really going out there alone? He asked finally. That's the job, Corporal. But if something happens, then I deal with it. He hesitated, then said, For what it's worth, ma'am, I'm glad it's you on Overwatch. I wouldn't trust anyone else. She paused just long enough to meet his eyes. Keep that radio live, Corporal. Tomorrow might get loud. At 2300 hours, she moved. The descent from the observation post was slow, measured, boots silent on rock, breath steady, every sense tuned to the rhythm of the night. The desert was alive with sound. Wind, crickets, the distant echo of something metallic shifting. She moved like she'd been born for it, low, efficient, unseen. 15 kilometers through rough terrain took her 3 hours. By 200, she reached the northern ridge overlooking the compound. She could see it clearly through her thermal optic guards on patrol, lights flickering in 3 buildings, vehicles parked in defensive arcs. This wasn't a resting place. It was a war machine in waiting. She built her hide carefully, blending into the rock until she became part of it. No one would find her unless they stepped on her. Then she waited. Hours passed, darkness bled into gray, the valley began to stir, guards rotated, engines coughed awake. The smell of diesel and stale coffee drifted up through the wind. Through her scope she saw him, the target, a tall man with a gray beard surrounded by nervous subordinates. He gestured with authority, confident, impatient, the kind of man who believed his walls would save him. Her radio clicked twice, the SEAL team's signal. Vera keyed her mic once in reply, never taking her eye off the scope. Overwatch status, Brenamman whispered. 16 hostiles, heavy weapons north wall, 2 technical vehicles south side. Security alertness, high, recommend extreme caution. Copy that, he said. We're adjusting approach vector, begin full overwatch. They moved like shadows through the eastern ravine, the path she'd recommended. They trusted her now, she realized, maybe not completely, but enough. Then she saw it movement on the western ridge. Her breath caught, 4 figures climbing into elevated positions, setting up weapons, spotters. Command overwatch, she transmitted quickly. Enemy overwatch forming West Ridge, 800 meters from your vector. 4 fighters, crew-served weapon. They'll have eyes on you in 3 minutes. Can you engage? Brenamman's voice came tight, controlled. Affirmative, but it'll compromise my position. Do it, we can't advance blind. Her body went still, time slowed. The first target, the spotter, was adjusting his optics. She fired once. He dropped. Before the echo faded, she transitioned, second shot clean through the gunner's chest. The other 2 scattered, she tracked one, missed, adjusted, fired again. 3 down, the last vanished behind stone. 10 seconds later, his helmet rose above the rock line. Mistake. Vera's final shot ended it. Western Ridge clear, she reported. Compound alerted, expect reaction. Below, alarms blared. Lights snapped on. Fighters shouted orders, scattering to defensive positions. Overwatch, relocate, Brenamman ordered. Negative, movement now will expose me. I'll hold until they're closer. Through her scope, she saw the gray-bearded target shouting orders. Vehicles started. They were preparing to evacuate. Command, she said sharply. Target is mobile. You won't reach him in time. Static crackled. We're compromised. All units withdraw. Vera exhaled. The smart choice was to move, survive, wait for another day. But the target, the architect of ambushes, the man who'd fed intel that nearly got Brenamman's men killed, was climbing into a vehicle. If he escaped now, the cycle would begin again. She adjusted her scope. 750 meters, partial obstruction. Not impossible. Command overwatch, she said. Request authorization to engage target. Pause, then, negative, withdraw, that's an order. Her finger rested on the trigger. The vehicle door slammed. 10 seconds. Lieutenant, Brenamman's voice barked through the earpiece. That's a direct. She fired. The target dropped instantly. Target eliminated, she said calmly, already packing her gear. Static exploded. Damn it, Lieutenant, you have 8 hostiles converging on your location. Understood, Command, but your mission objective is complete. She was already moving, sliding down the ridge as bullets began tearing into the rocks where she'd been moments earlier. 8 men hunting her. She had a head start, small, but enough. Radio crackled again. Overwatch, we're moving to intercept. Hold at the dry riverbed. Copy, she said, breath controlled even as adrenaline surged. Then she heard it, the low thrum of a helicopter in the distance. Wrong pitch, wrong direction, not theirs. Command, enemy helo inbound, likely thermal capable. Find cover. Cave system west of your position, 300 meters, Lindstrom's voice broke through. She changed direction immediately, climbing toward the jagged rocks ahead as the sound grew louder. 200 meters. The ground crumbled beneath her boots. 100. The rotor wash tore through the valley, blinding her with dust. 50. The cave yawned open like a secret. She dove inside just as the searchlight swept across the ridge. Inside, the air was cool and silent. Outside, chaos raged. Command, she whispered, voice steady. In cover, thermal concealment confirmed. Good, Brenamman said. Stay put. We're coming to get you. 10 minutes. She pressed her back to the stone wall, breathing slow, counting every second. Outside, she could hear enemy voices, close, searching, angry. They were coming. And Vera knew one truth better than anyone. Sometimes the most dangerous part of a mission wasn't the firefight. It was the waiting that came after. How long could silence last before it turned into fear? Inside the cave, it'd wait. The kind that pressed against the ribs, crept into the breath, and made every heartbeat sound too loud. Lieutenant Vera Kensington crouched behind a jagged pillar of rock, pistol drawn, rifle slung tight across her back. Outside, enemy voices rose and fell, quick bursts of command, the scrape of boots, the hollow click of a safety being switched off. They were searching. And they were close. She steadied her breathing, counted, listened. 3 entering the cave mouth. At least 5 more outside. Her mind ran the math automatically. Distances, angles, exit points. None were good. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness, slicing across the stone walls like blades of white fire. Vera stayed still, utterly still, until the light passed over her shoulder and moved on. The men advanced slowly, rifles raised, their voices cautious now. The echo turned each whisper into something ghostly. She pressed her back against the rock. Command, this is Overwatch, she whispered into her throat mic. 3 contacts inside the cave, more outside, they're moving deeper. Copy, came Brenamman's voice, tight with control. We're 8 minutes out, hold position, we'll draw them off. 8 minutes. Too long. One of the flashlights swung back, hesitated, then stopped on the ground near her position. Bootsteps approached, slow, deliberate. The fighter bent to study footprints in the dust. His finger hovered near the trigger. Vera exhaled once quietly, like prayer, and fired. 1 suppressed round. The man folded before he could shout. The others spun around, shouting in the narrow space. She ducked behind the pillar as bullets tore sparks off the wall. The cave filled with thunder and dust. She fired twice more, the flash from her muzzle momentarily blinding her in the confined space. Then silence, except for the ringing in her ears and the drip of loose sand falling from the ceiling. Command, she breathed. 3 hostiles neutralized inside, position compromised. We're 5 minutes out, Brenamman replied. Do not engage further, we're creating a diversion. She reloaded, wiped sweat from her temple. Her heart rate was steady again, not calm exactly, but controlled. Training did that. It made fear mechanical. Outside, the helicopter circled low, its searchlight sweeping the ridge again. The fighters were shouting now, dragging the bodies of their fallen comrades out of the entrance. Someone barked an order, furious, urgent. Then the night erupted. Gunfire from outside, not enemy fire this time, but precise, measured bursts. SEALs. Overwatch, we're at the entrance, Brenamman's voice came through, half drowned in static. Engaging now, move when I give the word. The firefight outside grew into chaos. Shouts, explosions, the whine of ricochets bouncing off rock. Vera waited, crouched, eyes fixed on the flickering light at the far end of the tunnel. Then the command came, calm, cold, unmistakable. "Move, Lieutenant, now." She bolted. The cave roared behind her as bullets chased the darkness. She emerged into smoke and flashing light. Muzzle burst strobed against the dust-filled air. Brenamman was there, half hidden behind a rock, weapon raised. He saw her and motioned sharply toward the ridge path. Lindstrom and two others laid down, covering fire, their movements disciplined, synchronized. Vera sprinted, 40 meters across open ground that felt like forever. The helicopter's searchlight swung toward her, then veered away as one of the SEALs fired a flare, confusing the pilot. She reached cover, lungs burning, dropped to one knee beside Brenamman. He didn't look at her. "Extraction point 200 meters," he said. "We move now." The team withdrew in bounding movements, 2 advancing, 4 covering textbook precision despite the noise and dust. The enemy tried to pursue, but they were disorganized now, furious and frightened. 10 minutes later, they broke contact. An hour after that, they reached the extraction zone. 2 black helicopters crouched on the valley floor, rotors biting at the night. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke. The vibration rattled through metal and bone alike. Across from her, Brenamman sat rigid, expression unreadable. Lindstrom gave her a quick nod, half respect, half warning. They lifted off. The valley fell away beneath them, a dark scar vanishing into the distance. The base smelled of fuel and dust. Floodlights cut through the night as the helicopters touched down inside the wire. Personnel gathered to watch. Word had already spread that SEAL Team 7 had come back early and not happy. Vera followed Brenamman into the command building, her rifle case slung over one shoulder. The rest of the team trailed behind, silent. Inside, Captain Thor Castleton waited. Older, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who'd seen enough war to know when discipline had to bend. "Commander Brenamman," he said, voice level, "report." "Sir, mission objectives achieved. High-value target neutralized, however." He glanced toward Vera. Lieutenant Kensington disobeyed a direct order to withdraw, engaged independently, and required emergency extraction. Castleton's gaze turned to her. "Is that accurate, Lieutenant?" "Yes, sir." "You disobeyed a direct order." "I did, sir." "Why?" "Because the target was escaping," she said simply. "If he'd reached that vehicle, we would have lost him and the intelligence network that nearly killed your men yesterday. I made the call I believed necessary." Castleton studied her for a long moment, then looked at Brenamman. "Your assessment?" Brenamman's jaw flexed. Her marksmanship was exceptional, her tactical reasoning sound. The elimination of the target disrupted enemy command in this sector, but she disobeyed me. She put herself, and by extension my team, at risk. Discipline has to mean something. Castleton nodded slowly. "And yet," he said, "your team is alive. The mission succeeded." Silence. The captain leaned back against the table, arms folded. "Lieutenant, I've read your file, the complete file. Afghanistan, the incident that led to your reassignment. You've made hard decisions before. Some saved lives. Others made superiors uncomfortable." Vera said nothing. "My problem," Castleton continued, "is that I can't reward disobedience and still call this a military. But I also can't punish success and still call it justice." He turned to Brenamman. "Recommendation, Commander." Brenamman hesitated, the muscles in his jaw tightening. "Finally, sir, Lieutenant Kensington's skills are extraordinary. Her judgment under pressure, while insubordinate, is tactically invaluable. She shouldn't be sitting behind a radio. She should be where she can do the most good." Castleton raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting she be formally attached to my team as our sniper. Full integration. That way her authority is clear. She acts within command structure, not outside it." It was a gamble. One that surprised even Vera. Castleton studied them both. Commander, you're asking to bring back into combat the same operator the bureaucracy buried to avoid political fallout. With respect, sir, Brenamman said, burying talent doesn't make war safer. It just makes us slower. The captain's mouth twitched, something close to a smile quickly hidden. He turned to Vera. If I approve this, Lieutenant, you'll operate directly under Commander Brenamman. His orders stand even when you disagree. Can you accept that? She hesitated. The question wasn't about hierarchy. It was about trust, something she hadn't given anyone in 3 years. Her eyes met Brenamman's. The anger was still there, but beneath it, something steadier, respect, maybe even guilt. Yes, sir, she said at last. I can accept that, provided my tactical input is heard before decisions are made. That's reasonable, Castleton said. He looked to Brenamman. Commander. Agreed, Brenamman replied. She advises I decide. Then it's settled, the captain said. Lieutenant Kensington is hereby attached to SEAL Team 7 as designated sniper for current operations. Commander, she's your responsibility. Make it work. He left them with a nod, conversation over. The next 48 hours were a blur of motion. Paperwork, equipment calibration, range testing, team drills. For the first time in years, Vera wasn't alone on a ridge watching other people act. She was part of something again, though part was a generous word. The team watched her carefully, not hostile, just measuring. She could feel it during training, the weight of unspoken questions. Can she keep up? Will she follow orders this time? Lindstrom acted as translator between worlds. He walked her through their signals, communication protocols, the unspoken rhythm that made the SEALs move like one body. They spent hours on the range. She demonstrated precision that silenced skepticism one round at a time, steel targets ringing at impossible distances. Afterward, Lindstrom leaned on the barricade beside her. You know, he said, most snipers brag after shots like that. I've already seen what bragging costs, she replied. He smiled faintly. The others will come around. They just need to see you work under pressure as part of us, not above us. She nodded, she understood. Trust was built on proof, not introductions. That proof came sooner than anyone expected. The mission brief arrived at dawn 2 days later. New intel from the captured facilitator pointed to a weapons supplier, a man coordinating the smuggling of advanced explosives into the region. Capture if possible, eliminate if necessary. The meeting would take place in 72 hours at a remote compound surrounded by open desert. No cover, no mercy. In the planning tent, Brenamman spread a satellite map across the table. The compound's here, single road access, flat terrain for 300 meters in all directions, security likely 8 to 10 fighters with RPGs. Our objective, secure the target and any intel on site. He looked up, Overwatch positions. All eyes turned to Vera. She studied the map, tracing the ridges with her finger. There, she said, pointing to a rise 1,200 meters out. Clear line of sight, elevation for wind advantage. I can cover your approach and neutralize threats before they close distance. Extraction risk, Lindstrom asked. High if we're compromised, she replied. I'll establish a secondary position here. She indicated a ravine behind the ridge. If forced to displace, I can withdraw under cover and regroup at the fallback point. Brenamman nodded slowly. Good contingencies. If they have a vehicle-mounted heavy weapon, it becomes priority 1, she said. Disable it before it pins you. A murmur of agreement rippled through the team. The plan took shape around her words. For the first time, she wasn't being tolerated. She was being included. When the briefing ended, Brenamman caught her arm as the others filed out. One thing, Lieutenant, he said quietly. You follow my orders out there, all of them. No improvisation unless I say so. Understood? Yes, Commander. He studied her for a heartbeat, then nodded. I know what you did was the right call, he said. But next time make it the right call and my call. We clear. Clear, she said. He left her standing by the table, the map still glowing under the dim tent light. For the first time in years, she felt the smallest pulse of something she hadn't dared name. Not redemption, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. And somewhere deep down, beneath all the rules and ranks and scars, she allowed herself the thought she'd buried after Afghanistan. Maybe she wasn't finished after all. How do you prepare for a mission that already feels like a memory you haven't lived yet? For Lieutenant Vera Kensington, the desert always carried a strange sense of déjà vu, like every grain of sand had seen another version of her come and go. But this time was different. This time she wasn't alone. The night before the mission, she sat outside her barracks, cleaning her rifle under the soft hum of the generator lights. The air smelled of oil, dust, and distance. Lindstrom walked up quietly, 2 mugs of bitter coffee in hand. You don't sleep much, do you? He asked. Vera gave a faint smile. Sleep and I have an agreement. It leaves me alone, I don't chase it. He handed her a mug and sat down on the sandbag beside her. For a while, neither spoke. The desert around them was vast, empty, and alive in its own way, crickets, distant engines, wind sighing through tents. Finally, Lindstrom said, You know the men are starting to talk. About me. About that shot, the one that killed the HVT. Vera looked up, one brow raised. Good talk or bad? He shrugged. Depends who you ask. Some think you're reckless. Others think you're the reason we're still breathing. She smirked. I'll take either. Means they're thinking. He nodded slowly. Just remember, trust in this unit isn't given, it's earned inch by inch. Brenamman's tough because he's lost people who didn't listen. You're different, but you'll get there. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. In war, words mattered less than what you did when things went wrong. They deployed before dawn. The helicopter roared low over the desert, kicking up waves of dust that glowed gold in the early light. The team moved with quiet purpose, each man a gear in a larger machine. Vera checked her pack. M110 rifle, sidearm, rangefinder, water, sand cloak, minimal rations. Her world condensed to essentials. 30 minutes to LZ, Brenamman called out over the intercom. Final check. The men responded with quick nods and glances, nothing wasted. Vera sat across from Finch, newly assigned to assist her as spotter for the operation. His face was a mix of excitement and quiet nerves. Remember, she said over the engine's roar, you're my eyes when I'm not looking. Range, wind, movement. Speak when it matters, stay quiet when it doesn't. He nodded fast. Yes, ma'am, I won't let you down. She smiled faintly. You won't, just breathe. The helicopter dropped into a shallow valley, 2 miles from the objective. Dust swallowed them as they disembarked. Engines faded into the horizon. The plan was simple on paper. Vera and Finch would climb to overwatch on the southern ridge. Brenamman's team would approach from the west, infiltrate the compound, and secure the target. If anything went wrong, Vera would make sure it didn't get worse. Simple. Except it never was. They reached the ridge just as dawn broke in full sunlight, washing the desert in white fire. The compound sat below, a concrete scar amid endless sand. Vehicles lined the outer perimeter. Men milled about, casual but armed. Through her scope, Vera counted. 4 guards north, 3 east, 1 at the gate. Heavy weapon on the roof, PKM, 50 rounds in the belt. Copy, Finch murmured, jotting notes on his pad. She adjusted focus. The target's there, white headscarf, black vest, talking to a driver, probably final prep before departure. Command, this is Overwatch, she whispered into the mic. Eyes on target, compound active, recommend immediate action before movement. Copy Overwatch, Brenamman's voice replied. We're in position, stand by. Minutes stretched thin. Vera tracked the target's gestures, nervous, hurried. He kept checking his watch. Something felt off. Then she saw it. A second convoy approaching from the east, 2 pickup trucks loaded with fighters. Command Overwatch, she said sharply. Additional vehicles inbound east side, 10 personnel. ETA 2 minutes. You'll lose element of surprise. Brenamman cursed quietly. Understood, adjusting entry vector. Kensington, can you delay them? Affirmative, engaging now. She lined up the lead vehicle, waited for the wind lull and fired. The bullet struck the radiator dead center. The engine hissed, stalled, smoke rising. The truck veered off course, crashing into the sand. Panic spread instantly. Vehicle 1 disabled, she reported. Second slowing, rear gunner dismounting. Another shot, the gunner dropped. Target convoy delayed, Finch breathed. Command proceed, she said. The SEALs moved, shadows in daylight crossing open terrain fast and low. Through her scope, Vera tracked them. Brenamman at point, Lindstrom covering flank. They reached the outer wall without detection. But the target, he was moving, fast. Guards were shouting, scattering. The heavy gun on the roof swung toward the ridge. Finch, wind 5 knots east. Adjust hold, she said quickly. He read off the range. 700 meters, slight elevation. She steadied her breathing, fired. The roof gunner dropped before he could align the barrel. Then chaos erupted. Machine gun fire tore across the compound. The SEALs breached the gate. Explosions echoed off stone walls. Vera's scope moved constantly, scanning, tracking, eliminating threats before they reached her team. Overwatch, north wall clear, she called. 2 hostiles moving west courtyard. Copy, Brenamman's voice shouted over gunfire. We have visual. The firefight lasted minutes that felt like hours. Every round she fired meant someone down there got to breathe another second. Then suddenly silence. Command, this is Overwatch, she whispered. Status. Static, then Brenamman's voice came through, breathless. Target secured. Minor injuries, we're prepping for exfil. Vera exhaled slowly, her muscles finally unclenching. Copy. I'll maintain Overwatch until you're clear. But something felt wrong. Her gut twisted, that instinct honed by too many years and too many almosts. She scanned the ridge opposite, empty, then a flicker, a shimmer of heat where it shouldn't be. Command, new contact north ridge, possible sniper, single glint glass reflection. Can you confirm? She zoomed in. Yes, there it was. A man, prone, partially camouflaged, long barrel aimed directly toward the compound. He's got eyes on you, she whispered. Do you have a shot? She measured, wind 8 knots, distance 1,430 meters, cross-like glare. Barely, she said. If I miss, he takes one of yours. Then don't miss. She smiled slightly. Copy that. She adjusted her rifle, tilted her cheek against the stock, exhaled. The mirage danced over her target, the air bending, light flickering. Time stretched. And in that heartbeat, everything disappeared, the noise, the dust, the rules. Just her, the rifle, the breath. She fired. The distant figure jerked, rolled, then went still. Through her scope, she saw the rifle tumble from his grasp, sliding down the slope. Sniper neutralized, she said softly. Static answered her for a moment. Then Brenamman's voice, quiet, low. Nice shot, Ghost. She froze just for a second, that name. The one she hadn't heard in 3 years. Her voice caught in her throat before she steadied it. Overwatch confirms all clear. Begin extraction. They regrouped an hour later at the extraction zone. The desert was brutally bright, every shadow sharp-edged. The SEALs moved with the calm of men who just survived something they shouldn't have. Brenamman approached her as the helicopter blades spun up. "Not bad for your first full op with us," he said, tone almost light. "Not bad," she echoed dryly. He smirked. "Don't get used to compliments, Lieutenant." Lindstrom joined them, helmet under his arm. "That shot saved us all. Guy had a perfect angle on the breach point. Another 5 seconds and we'd be short one commander." Brenamman glanced at her. "Guess I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. "You gave me a chance to do my job again. That's enough." They boarded the helicopter. As it lifted, Vera looked back at the compound shrinking into the distance, smoke rising, sand swallowing the chaos. War never left clean lines. It left stories carved in silence. Back at base, they debriefed in the command tent. The report was clean, minimal casualties, objective secure. No mention of the unauthorized rifle she'd once smuggled, or the reputation she'd carried like a scar. When the meeting ended, Brenamman lingered. "You know," he said, "I wasn't sure about you when this started. You broke every rule that keeps people alive. But today—" He paused. "Today you proved that maybe some rules need breaking." Vera studied him, unsure whether to thank him or warn him. "Rules exist for a reason," she said, "but sometimes they forget the reason was people." He smiled faintly. "You sound like Lindstrom when he's drunk." She laughed softly. It felt strange, foreign, but good. As he left, she sat for a long while staring at the after-action report in front of her. Her name was there, not buried at the bottom, not hidden behind titles. Lieutenant Vera Kensington, Sniper Overwatch. It wasn't redemption. But it was the first time in years that her name stood beside results, not rumors. She folded the paper, tucked it into her pocket, and stepped outside. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, quiet, dangerous, and alive. And for the first time since Afghanistan, she didn't feel like a ghost. She felt like someone still becoming. How do you know when a mission stops being about justice and starts being about revenge? For Lieutenant Vera Kensington, that question started whispering the moment the gunfire stopped being clean. 2 weeks after the desert operation, they were heroes, unofficially of course. The mission report went up the chain of command, wrapped in praise and classification. But while the paperwork gleamed, something beneath it didn't feel right. The orders kept coming, faster, sharper, less explained. Targets multiplied. Intel was vague. They weren't taking down threats anymore. They were erasing names. And Vera felt it. The shift. It began on a night thick with humidity and silence. A jungle valley this time, not a desert. The heat was suffocating, and the trees pressed in like walls. Brenamman's team had been rerouted from routine overwatch to a direct strike mission. "Confirmed insurgent logistics node," the orders said. "Destroy everything, no prisoners." But even before they hit the ground, the data felt wrong. The helicopter skimmed low, rotors slicing through mist. 5 minutes, Brenamman called. His voice was steady, but Vera could hear something in it, the edge of unease that mirrored her own. She sat opposite him, adjusting her scope. Finch sat beside her again, now confident, less nervous, but still young enough to believe in the word target without asking who it meant. "Intel says they're storing weapons," he said, checking his notes. "We hit hard, we're done fast." "Intel says a lot of things," Vera replied. "Half the time it's guessing." He frowned. "You think it's wrong?" "I think we'll find out soon enough." The helicopter banked sharply, then descended through the trees. The LZ was narrow, barely wide enough for landing. The team spilled out, spreading into formation, rifles sweeping in perfect arcs. Vera broke off toward the ridge, her overwatch point. Finch followed close, his breathing quick but controlled. From above, the village below looked small, a handful of huts, a few storage sheds, one larger building in the center. Smoke curled lazily from a cooking fire. She zoomed in. No visible weapons, no guard rotations, no signs of sentries. Just people. She keyed her mic. Command, this is Overwatch. I have visual on target area. Multiple civilians present. Repeat, multiple non-combatants. Static crackled, then, copy Overwatch. Confirm you're on correct grid. She double-checked her coordinates. Affirmative. Pause, then Brenamman's voice. Overwatch mission parameters unchanged. Proceed with caution. Unchanged. The word hit her like a stone. Sir, she said slowly, you're about to enter a populated zone. I advise holding position until confirmation. No reply. Below, the seals moved closer, ghosts in the green. Through her scope, Vera saw faces now. Women, children. They weren't insurgents, they were villagers. She felt her throat tighten. Command, abort entry. This is not a hostile zone. Still nothing. Then, Lieutenant, maintain Overwatch. That's an order. The men reached the largest structure. Brenamman's hand went up, the signal for breach. Vera exhaled sharply. Gotta admit, Brenamman, stand down. Then the door blew open. The explosion ripped through the hut, light flashing against the trees. Screams tore through the smoke, not military shouts but terrified human sounds. Through her scope she saw it all. A woman clutching a child. A man running from the blast, unarmed. A boy frozen in the open, eyes wide, staring straight toward the ridge, as if he could see her. Her hands trembled, she couldn't look away. Command, you hit civilians, she said hoarsely. There are no weapons here, you need to. Enough, Lieutenant, Brenamman's voice roared through the comms. We had faulty intel, it's done, secure the site. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. You knew, she said. No one knew, he snapped. We followed orders. But his tone told her everything. The aftermath was chaos. The site was secured, the bodies buried hastily, the report rewritten. Unconfirmed collateral damage, it said. Possible civilian presence, still under review. Back at base, no one spoke about it. Not officially, not out loud. But the silence was heavier than any firefight. Vera spent hours on the range afterward, shooting until her shoulder bruised. Finch tried to talk once, but she shut him down with a look. It wasn't his fault. He was still learning what war did to people who asked the wrong questions. Late that night, Brenamman came to find her. She was sitting on an ammo crate, cleaning her rifle under the single dim bulb of the armory. You want to tell me why you disobeyed a direct comm order today? He asked quietly. She didn't look up. You mean the one where I told you not to blow up civilians? His jaw tightened. You don't know what that site was. Yes, I do, she said coldly. I saw it through my scope. Families, children. You can dress it in mission language, but I know what I saw. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees. We had orders. We execute what's given to us. If we start second-guessing every coordinate, then maybe fewer kids die, she cut in sharply. He didn't answer. The silence stretched until she finally looked up. You ever wonder why intel keeps being wrong lately? She asked. He frowned. What are you getting at? She set the rifle aside. I think someone feeding us selective data. These nodes we're hitting, they're not what the files say they are. First the desert, now the jungle. Someone's painting targets that don't fit the picture. Brenamman shook his head. You're reaching. Am I? She said. You saw what I saw. That wasn't a weapons depot. It was a message, one written in blood. Someone's testing how far we'll go without asking questions. He exhaled, long and slow. Even if that's true, it's above our pay grade. That's the problem, she said softly. It always is. The next morning, she found Finch sitting alone outside the hangar, staring at the horizon. His radio lay beside him, turned off. You okay? She asked. He didn't look up. You ever see something you can't forget? She sat beside him, every day. I keep thinking, he said quietly, about that boy, the one who looked right at us, like he knew who we were. She swallowed the lump in her throat. You can't carry it forever, Finch. You just learn how to walk with it. He turned to her, eyes wet. How do you do that? She gave a sad half-smile. Badly. They sat in silence, the morning sun washing over the tarmac. Somewhere behind them, engines started, another mission already spinning up. War didn't pause for grief. It just folded it into the next operation. 2 days later, Brenamman called an emergency briefing. The next target was in the mountains, an alleged communications hub tied to the same network. Vera studied the map as he spoke, her gut twisted again. Another isolated settlement, another confirmed threat. She caught his eye. Same source, she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. She folded her arms. You don't trust it either. Doesn't matter, he said. Orders are orders. But she saw it now, the same doubt she'd carried since the jungle. He was starting to feel it too. Lindstrom leaned in. So what's our move? Brenamman exhaled. We go, but this time we verify before we strike. Kensington, your lead overwatch again. If this intel's bad, we'll know before we pull the trigger. Vera nodded slowly. Then let's make sure the truth has eyes this time. That night before they deployed, she sat alone on the flight line, the desert wind tugging at her hair. The stars above looked sharp enough to cut through skin. She thought about that boy's face, the shock, the fear, the silent question he'd never get to ask. She told Finch you learned to walk with it. But that wasn't true. You didn't learn to walk with ghosts. You just learned to stop letting them trip you. Still, a voice inside her whispered something colder. What if this isn't an accident? What if the next one isn't either? She didn't have answers, just a promise forming quietly in her chest. If the system was broken, she'd stop being its weapon. And if someone up there was using them like pawns, she'd find out why. The helicopter engines roared to life. She climbed aboard, the desert lights shrinking behind them. Brenamman met her eyes across the dim interior. He didn't say a word, but he didn't have to. Something between them had shifted, no longer commander and subordinate, not quite allies, but two people standing at the same edge of the same cliff. The kind where the only way down was through the truth. How many times could you obey before obedience became guilt? That thought followed Lieutenant Vera Kensington all the way up the mountain. The helicopter climbed higher into thin air, rotors straining against the wind. Below, the desert turned to stone, jagged ridges, barren slopes, pockets of mist curling through ravines like ghosts trying to find their way home. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke. Brenamman sat opposite her, jaw locked, eyes fixed on the horizon. Lindstrom checked his gear in silence. Finch sat beside her, clutching his pack like it might vanish if he let go. 10 minutes to LZ, the pilot called. Vera looked out the window, saw the compound perched like a scar on the mountainside. It was small, remote, easy to miss. Too easy. Her gut twisted again. The same feeling she'd had before the jungle, before the civilians. She leaned toward Brenamman. Commander, that site's wrong. Look at the terrain, no fortifications, no satellite dishes, no vehicle tracks. That's not a comms hub. He didn't look at her. You think command made the same mistake twice? She met his gaze. I think someone wants us to clean up something they don't want found. He sighed. Until we have proof, we follow orders. She nodded once, but her eyes said what words couldn't. Proof isn't hard to find when you stop looking the other way. They touched down on a narrow plateau at dawn. Thin air, bitter wind, every breath felt like swallowing glass. All right, Brenamman said, his voice low over the comms. Overwatch takes ridge position north. Team 1 breach from south wall. We move in 10. Vera and Finch broke off, climbing toward higher ground. The rocks crumbled underfoot, the climb brutal in the thin atmosphere. By the time they reached the ridge, sweat had already soaked through their gear despite the cold. Vera unfolded her rifle, set up the bipod, and scanned the compound through her scope. Small structure, metal roof, single generator, a few crates stacked by the entrance. And one figure, unarmed, stepping out into the morning light. An old man. Gray hair, civilian clothes. She frowned. Finch logged this. Male approximately 60, no weapon, moving between structures. "Copy," he said quietly. She kept watching. Another figure emerged, a woman this time, then a child. Her stomach dropped. "This isn't a hub," she whispered. "It's a village outpost." "Command, this is Overwatch," she said quickly. "We have multiple non-combatants on site. Repeat, civilians confirmed. Do not engage, I say again." Static cut her off. Finch, check signal. He tapped his radio, frowned. Jammed, full interference. Her blood ran cold. They cut comms. She grabbed her binoculars again, scanning the southern approach. The SEALs were already moving, a line of figures weaving through the rocks toward the compound. She keyed her mic anyway. "Command, abort assault. Civilians present, do not engage." "Nothing." Finch's breathing quickened. "They can't hear you." Her pulse hammered. They're walking into another. The first explosion tore through the valley before she could finish. Fire bloomed from the compound, debris flying, walls collapsing. Screams carried up the ridge. "Jesus," Finch whispered. Vera's scope filled with chaos, the same nightmare replaying itself in a different landscape. Men, women, children running through smoke. No weapons, no fighters. "Finch, record everything," she said through clenched teeth. "Camera feed, coordinates, timestamps, now." He obeyed instantly, setting the digital recorder beside her. Below, Brenamman's team stormed the wreckage, moving fast, methodical, searching, clearing, reporting. They didn't know. Then the sound of engines reached her ears, faint but distinct. She turned her scope east and froze. 3 vehicles, armored, approaching fast from the canyon road. Not locals. Uniforms, black gear. No insignias. "Finch," she whispered, "those aren't friendlies." He looked through his monocular, eyes wide. "Then who?" "Private contractors," she said. "Maybe intel ops, maybe cleanup." The lead vehicle stopped outside the burning compound. Men stepped out, calm, deliberate. They weren't reacting to the blast. They were confirming it. And then Vera understood. The mission wasn't a mistake. It was a cover-up. She zoomed in closer, heart pounding. One of the men wore a headset, sleek, military grade. He turned slightly, and the morning sun caught his face. Vera's breath caught. She knew him. Major Halden Royce. Intelligence Command. The same officer who'd signed the coordinates for the last 3 missions. "Finch," she said, voice trembling, "you're recording this, right?" "Yes, ma'am." "Keep it running. Whatever happens, don't stop." Below, Royce spoke briefly with Brenamman. The commander stiffened, nodded once, then turned away, his movements clipped. Vera's throat went dry. "He's talking to them." "Maybe he doesn't know who they are," Finch said, desperate. "No," Vera whispered, "he knows." She could see it in his posture, the stiffness, the way his hand hovered near his radio but never touched it. He knew exactly what was happening. One of the black-suited men gestured toward the ridge, toward her. Vera's instinct screamed, "They've spotted us, pack up now." Finch scrambled to close the recorder, but... "Go," she hissed. A single round cracked past them, striking the rock above. They ducked, rolling behind cover as dust exploded around them. "Move north," she shouted. "Stay low." They ran, heartbeats pounding in rhythm, with the gunfire behind them. Rounds chewed through stone, pinged off metal. They reached a narrow crevice, dove inside, gasping. Are we compromised? Finch panted. Yes, she said, and they're not supposed to miss. She checked her ammo low, scoped out the canyon route narrow, exposed. Finch, listen carefully, she said, voice low, measured. If we don't make it back, that recording, it's your life insurance. Get it to Captain Castleton, no one else. Understand? He swallowed hard, nodded. They waited, breath shallow. The mountain had gone eerily quiet again. Then she heard it, footsteps crunching over gravel. Slow, careful, getting closer. She raised her rifle, eyes fixed on the crevice opening. The first figure appeared, black uniform, face hidden by a visor. She fired. The man dropped. Two more emerged. She rolled sideways, fired again. Another hit. Then the third fired back, close enough for the heat of the round to kiss her cheek. She ducked, reloaded, fired blind around the rock. When the silence returned, she heard a voice echoing through the canyon. Lieutenant Kensington, the voice called, calm, almost polite. You don't know what you're part of, walk away. Her stomach twisted, she knew that voice. Royce. You killed civilians, she shouted back. You made us your trigger. Collateral, he said simply. You of all people should understand that. She gritted her teeth, not like this. Royce's tone turned colder. You don't get to decide what this is anymore. Then she heard it, the whine of a drone overhead. Finch, move, she shouted, now. They sprinted uphill as the drone fired, a flash of white light, a wave of pressure, a roar of heat. The ground gave way beneath them, dust, fire, gravity. She hit hard, rolling through the dirt, ears ringing, lungs screaming for air. When her vision cleared, Finch was gone. Finch, she shouted, choking on smoke. No answer. She crawled toward the ridge edge, saw a figure below, limp, half buried in debris. God, no. She stumbled down, dragging him free. He was alive, barely. His arm twisted wrong, blood pooling beneath him. Stay with me, she said, pressing her hand to his chest. He coughed weakly, the recorder. It's okay, she said, forcing a smile she didn't feel. I've got it. He tried to speak again, but his eyes unfocused. His breath slowed. Finch. Nothing. For the first time in years, she felt something break inside her. Not fear, not anger. Just a quiet, unbearable grief. She took the recorder from his vest, still intact, and tucked it into her pack. Then she looked up at the ridge, at the men coming down after her. Her voice was steady as she spoke into the dead radio. Command, this is Lieutenant Kensington. Observation compromised. Friendly KIA, engaging enemy forces. If anyone hears this, know that we were set up. She chambered a round, exhaled slowly and aimed. If they wanted to bury her like before, they'd have to earn it. Hours later, the mountains were silent again. No sign of the black vehicles, no signal on the comms, no movement. But in the ashes of the ridge, half buried beneath stone and smoke, a single rifle case lay open. Empty. And somewhere in the darkness below, a lone figure moved, limping, bloodied, alive. Vera Kensington didn't know where she was going. Only that she couldn't go back. Not yet. Not until the truth was heard. And maybe, just maybe, avenged. How long could a person run from the people they once saluted? Lieutenant Vera Kensington didn't know. She just knew she wasn't stopping tonight. The wind tore through the mountain passes, slicing cold against her skin. Her shoulder burned from shrapnel. Her lungs felt shredded. But she kept moving, half crawling, half stumbling, following the thin thread of instinct that separated survivors from stories. Behind her, the ridge still smoked. Finch's body lay buried somewhere in that fire. She couldn't look back, not now. If she did, she'd stop. And stopping meant ending. She found shelter in a hollow carved by rain and time, a cave barely deep enough to hide a person. She collapsed inside, pressing her hand to her bleeding arm, biting down to keep from crying out. Her pack clattered beside her, battered, scorched, but intact. Inside it, her rifle, half her ammo, one canteen, and the recorder. Finch's last act. Proof that they'd been used. She clicked it on. The small light blinked weakly. Static, then her own voice came through, calm, distant. Command abort assault, civilians confirmed. And then silence, followed by the explosion. Her throat tightened. She turned it off, sitting in the dark, the weight of the world pressing against the cave walls. She thought of Finch, the way he'd believed in orders, in purpose, in her. And how belief, in war, was the most dangerous weapon of all. Outside, thunder rolled across the peaks, or maybe it was distant artillery. It didn't matter, the sound had always been the same. By morning, she'd stitched her wound with a trembling hand, and what little thread she had. She tore her patch from her shoulder, the insignia that had once meant everything, and buried it in the dirt. Names, badges, ranks. All meaningless now. She checked the recorder again, still functional, battery low. She needed a signal, a way out, someone she could trust. Captain Castleton. The only one who'd ever seen through bureaucracy without flinching. If she could get the recording to him, maybe Finch's death wouldn't be just another line in a forgotten file. But that meant getting off the mountain, past patrols, drones, maybe even Brenamman's unit. That thought hit hard. Brenamman. She didn't want to believe he'd known. Didn't want to picture the moment he'd stood with Royce, listening, nodding, choosing silence over truth. But the image wouldn't leave her. Trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. 3 days passed. She traveled mostly at night, following dry stream beds, sleeping in shadows. The mountain bled into desert, and the world became wider but not safer. By the 4th day, she reached a road, an old supply route long abandoned. She walked until her legs screamed, then found a gas station ruined near a dry well. The cracked glass still held reflections of a world that had forgotten itself. Inside, she found an old first aid kit, a cracked mirror, and a half-broken radio. She turned the dial slowly, scanning through static until a faint signal flickered through. Brenamman, KIA confirmation pending. Overwatch presumed rogue. Repeat, rogue. Her stomach dropped. They buried her already, officially dead. She sank to the floor, the voice echoing through the dust. Dead meant invisible. Invisible meant dangerous. She smiled faintly, a bitter, tired smile. Guess that makes us even. That night she built a fire behind the ruined station, the flame hidden by broken walls. She cleaned her rifle, checked her gear, and recorded a message on Finch's device. If anyone finds this, my name is Lieutenant Vera Kensington, former sniper, U.S. Navy. Mission log, mountain operation, Sector Delta. Civilian casualties confirmed. Coordinates falsified. Orders issued by Major Halden Royce, Intelligence Command. Her voice cracked but steadied. Finch Daringer was killed trying to expose the truth. This recording contains proof. Deliver it to Captain Thor Castleton, Forward Base Atlas. Tell him we didn't go rogue, we were betrayed. She stopped, staring into the flames. The recorder blinked, waiting. Then she whispered, and tell him I'm not done yet. The next morning she started south, toward the nearest transport route. Every mile hurt. Every step was a negotiation with exhaustion. But she kept walking. By dusk, she reached a small border town, the kind that lived between wars, half forgotten and half afraid. People stared as she passed, mud-streaked, blood-stained, uniforms stripped of insignia. She kept her head low, moving with the kind of weariness that no one questioned. In a narrow alley behind a mechanic's shop, she found what she needed: a satellite truck, its dish bent, its paint faded. The owner, an old man with eyes like sharpened glass, leaned against the doorframe. American, he asked. Was, she said. He looked her over. You're running. Not running, she replied, reaching. He studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the truck. Satellite uplinks old, but she breathes. Signal comes and goes with the wind. What are you sending? Something worth dying for. He smiled faintly. Everything here is. He let her in. Inside, the truck smelled of oil and burnt circuits. She hooked the recorder to the console, fingers trembling as she rerouted the signal. The uplink flickered, connection weak, unstable. She typed a destination code, Castleton's encrypted channel. Come on, she whispered. Just once, let the universe cooperate. Static filled the air, then a tone, connection found. Base Atlas Secure Channel authenticate, a voice said through the speaker. This is Lieutenant Kensington, she said quickly. Authorization code 329er Fox, priority 1 transmission, evidence of compromised intel and civilian casualties linked to Major Royce, sending data now. Pause, then, Lieutenant Kensington, you're supposed to be dead. Guess the report was premature. The voice hesitated. Transmit. She hit send. The recorder's light blinked, data streaming painfully slow. The screen flashed upload, 7%, 8%. Then the sound of engines. Outside. She froze. The old man appeared at the door, eyes wide. Black vehicles, 3 of them. Royce's men. Buy me 1 minute, she said, pulling her rifle free. He nodded once, no fear, just quiet understanding, and walked outside. She heard him shout something in a language she didn't know, then a gunshot, then another. She didn't look, couldn't. The upload hit 51%. Bullets tore through the truck's side. She ducked, firing through the shattered window. 1 man dropped, 2 more flanked. 72%, she muttered through gritted teeth. She reloaded, kicked the door open, fired again. Her arm screamed with pain, but she kept going. The smell of oil and blood filled the air. One of Royce's men reached the truck. Climbing onto the steps, she shot him point blank. 94%. The screen flashed red, signal loss. No, no, no. She slammed the console. The screen flickered, sputtered. Then a voice, faint, distant, but there. Data received. Castleton copy. Stand by for retrieval. She exhaled, half laughing, half crying. You better be fast, Captain. She grabbed the recorder, tossed it into her vest, and ran. The truck exploded behind her, whether by bullet or by choice, she didn't know. The heat shoved her forward into the dust. When she rolled over, the world was on fire. The old man was gone. The town was screaming. But she was still breathing. And the truth, finally, was in motion. She limped toward the outskirts, every step like dragging a ghost. Her radio crackled weakly, then a familiar voice. Vera, this is Brenamman. If you're alive, respond. She froze. Vera, listen, his voice said. They're calling you rogue. Royce's people are moving fast, but Castleton's got your transmission. He's pulling strings, trying to reach you. You have maybe 12 hours before they lock the borders. She hesitated. You knew, she said quietly. A long pause, then, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know how deep it went. Royce threatened my team, said if we questioned the intel, he'd cut our supply line, list us as compromised. I thought I could protect them by staying quiet. She almost laughed, a dry, broken sound. You can't protect people with silence, Commander. You just give their ghosts better aim. I know, he said. Let me help you now. Why? Because Finch deserved better, he said simply, and so do you. She closed her eyes. Send coordinates. Copy. Nearest safe extraction point, 40 clicks south, abandoned airstrip, Sector 3. Castleton sending a transport. Understood. She started walking again, bloodied, limping, the world burning behind her. The sun was low now, turning the sky red like it was bleeding too. For the first time since this all began, Vera wasn't just surviving. She was moving toward something. Not redemption. Not revenge. Just the truth. And sometimes, that was enough to keep a person alive. How far could truth travel before someone tried to shoot it down? Lieutenant Vera Kensington had 12 hours to find out. The desert stretched endless and cruel beneath a sky the color of old steel. Each step toward the abandoned airstrip felt heavier, as if the earth itself were pulling her back into silence. Her shoulder throbbed, her ribs burned, but she kept walking, rifle slung, recorder pressed against her heart like a pulse that wasn't her own. By the time she reached the ridgeline overlooking the strip, the sun was falling, an orange coin sinking into dust. Below, the airfield sprawled like a graveyard of machines. 2 rust-eaten hangars, a cracked runway, and there, half hidden by shadows, a small aircraft with engines idling. She lifted her binoculars. No markings, no transponder beacon. But a man stood beside it, hands clasped behind his back. Major Halden Royce. Of course it was him. She lowered the glass, breathing once through her nose. Then she started down the slope, every instinct screaming, every step deliberate. If Castleton's transport was still en route, it hadn't arrived yet. And if Royce was here, he wasn't waiting to talk. When she reached the tarmac, the wind had turned cold. Royce didn't move. His expression was calm, professional, the same mask she'd seen a dozen times in briefings, the kind men wore when lying had become muscle memory. "Lieutenant Kensington," he said, "you look worse than your file photo." She stopped 20 meters away. "You look exactly like yours." He almost smiled. "You've made things complicated." "Complicated," she echoed. "That's what you call murdering civilians." "They weren't civilians," he said softly. "They were logistics assets, collateral infrastructure. The distinction is bureaucratic." "You keep using words to hide what they mean," she said. "People died because you needed numbers that made sense on paper." Royce studied her for a long moment. "Do you really think you've done something noble? You sent your data. It won't matter. Castleton will be contained within the hour. The recording will disappear like every inconvenient truth before it." "Maybe," she said, raising her rifle slightly. "But now you have to kill me too, and that's one problem you can't bury quietly." He sighed. "You were always a liability, Kensington. Brilliant but moral. That combination doesn't survive long." "Neither do tyrants." His eyes narrowed. "You think this is tyranny, this is maintenance. Someone has to keep the machinery turning. You soldiers, you need clean narratives. Heroes and villains, ideal and function." "Function built on lies," she said, "and you made me your trigger. You volunteered for service. Don't pretend your hands were clean before me." The words hit like shrapnel. She thought of Finch, of the boy in the jungle, of every shot she'd fired in the name of something that kept changing its name. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. "Maybe my hands are dirty," she said quietly, "but at least I know whose blood it is." Royce's hand drifted toward the pistol on his hip. "This is your last chance to disappear. Walk away, and you can keep pretending you're still one of the good ones." She shook her head. "You don't get to decide that anymore." The shot came fast, his, not hers, a flash of movement, a spark of sound. But she'd already moved, the round grazing her sleeve as she dropped to one knee and fired. Her bullet hit him high in the shoulder. He staggered back, shock flashing across his face. The echo rolled across the empty airfield, swallowed by the wind. Royce collapsed against the wing of the plane, blood spreading across his uniform. You think this changes anything," he gasped. Vera approached slowly, rifle lowered now. "I think it changes everything for Finch," she said, "and for every name you turned into data." He laughed once, short, bitter. "You'll be hunted for this. They'll call you a traitor." They already did. She stepped closer, pulled the recorder from her vest and held it up. But this time, the truth's louder than their lies. He tried to speak again, but the breath rattled out of him instead. When it stopped, the desert went still. She stood there for a long time, watching the last light fade from his eyes, not triumph, not vengeance, just the end of something poisonous. Then she turned toward the horizon. Headlights appeared in the distance, a pair of vehicles bouncing along the broken road. Vera raised her weapon again, ready to vanish back into the dunes if she had to. But when the first jeep stopped, the man who climbed out wasn't a contractor. It was Brenamman. He walked toward her slowly, hands raised. His face looked older, heavier with whatever he'd had to trade to get here. "You picked a hell of a place to end a career," he said. "Didn't pick it," she replied. "It found me." He looked past her, saw Royce's body, the blood, the plane. His jaw tightened. "Is it done?" She nodded. "It's done." Behind him, two medics approached cautiously. "Castleton's inbound," Brenamman said. "He got your file, your recording. He fought to keep it from disappearing. You made more enemies than either of us can count, but you made the truth visible. That's something." She almost smiled. That's all Finch wanted. They stood in silence as the wind shifted, carrying the smell of fuel and dust. "You could still come back," Brenamman said after a while. "Testify, clear your name." "My name doesn't matter," she said. "Only the story does." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were reckless. I was wrong. You just refused to die quietly." She gave a tired half-smile. "Old habits." The sound of rotor blades grew louder. A helicopter approaching from the west, searchlight sweeping across the runway. "Castleton's transport." Brenamman turned to wave it in, then looked back at her. "Vera, are you coming with us?" She looked past him, toward the rising light, the empty desert stretching forever. She could go back, face hearings, reports, headlines written by men who'd never held a rifle. Or she could vanish, take what she knew, and make sure it lived where no one could silence it. She thought of Finch, of the old man at the radio, of the boy in the jungle. Some truths didn't need microphones. They just needed someone to carry them. "I'll follow," she said softly, "just not in your direction." Brenamman studied her, maybe understanding, maybe not. Then he handed her something, Finch's dog tags, scratched but whole. "He deserved better," he said. She closed her hand around them. "He'll get it." The helicopter landed, dust swirling. Brenamman climbed aboard, giving her one last nod. Then they were gone, fading into the dusk. Vera stood alone on the tarmac, wind whipping through the silence. She looked down at the recorder, cracked now, burned around the edges but still blinking. A heartbeat in plastic and wire. She pressed play. Finch's voice came through, faint and shaky. "We're doing the right thing, right, ma'am? I just want to make sure we're the good guys." Her eyes closed. "We tried, Finch," she whispered. "God knows we tried." She watched the helicopter disappear into the horizon, a small dot swallowed by distance. Then she turned east, toward the mountains. The wind carried her footprints away almost as soon as she made them. No headlines, no medals, no applause. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth no longer belonged to the wrong people. She paused at the edge of the runway, looking back once at the body, the plane, the fading sun. War had taken everything from her, but it hadn't taken her soul. That, she realized, was the only real victory left to claim. She whispered into the wind, voice barely audible but steady. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." And then she walked into the desert. Not to vanish, but to live in a world that finally might listen.